Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some really fascinating material to unpack today. It's all about something so fundamental, isn't it? Our relationship with money.
Absolutely. We're digging into a source, a guide really, that aims to help you completely rethink how you see money, how you interact with it. The goal it sets out is something called financial independence.
Right. And we should be clear, this isn't, just another budgeting seminar or investment tips kind of thing.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, those things might happen as a result, but the core idea here is much deeper. It's that money isn't just about the numbers, the dollars and cents. It's woven right into our lives, our time, our values, what actually makes us feel fulfilled.
So our mission for this deep dive is, well, to guide you through the first few crucial chapters of this particular program. We'll pull out the key insights, the really important bits, maybe some challenging ideas too.
Yeah, the aim is to give you a fresh lens, a new way of looking at money and the role it plays, often, without us even realizing it.
And the source material, it starts by painting a pretty stark picture, doesn't it? It talks about the challenges lots of people face.
It really does. It highlights things like the huge weight of debt so many carry, that feeling of being completely trapped by the need to earn money, the constant chasing after more that often doesn't satisfy.
And this feeling of dissatisfaction, even when on paper, people have a lot.
Exactly, even in very affluent societies. It sets the stage, basically, showing why just tweaking things might not be enough, why a real shift in perspective could be, well, essential.
Okay, so let's dive into that landscape. Chapter 1, it gets right into it with this idea of the money trap and what it calls the old roadmap for money.
Yeah, this chapter really examines the financial reality for, honestly, a huge number of people. It explains how that traditional view, you trade your time, your life force, for money, how that often leaves people feeling completely stuck.
Like they're just sacrificing their lives.
Pretty much. Sacrificing their actual lives, their energy, maybe even relationships, all just to earn a paycheck. It's quite a sobering picture.
The source uses this really striking phrase, making a dime versus making a living.
It does, and it doesn't just state it. It walks you through a typical day for someone caught in this. That alarm clock, 6:45 a.m., it says, blaring, not gently waking you.
Then the mad dash, right? Shower, get dressed in the work costume.
Whatever that might be for your job. Maybe grabbing some quick, unsatisfying breakfast or just coffee on the run.
And then the commute. The source really doesn't pull any punches there.
No, it calls it a daily punishment. Stuck in traffic, crammed onto a train or bus, losing hours of your life before you even start the official workday. It's grim when you think about it that way.
You finally arrive, maybe 9:30, and then it's, 8-9 hours of navigating the workplace.
Dealing with the boss, maybe difficult colleagues, demanding customers, constant pressure, deadlines.
Yeah.
The performance of looking busy.
Oh, yeah. That performance, trying to hide mistakes, smooth things over. The forced smiles.
It's a huge drain on emotional energy, isn't it? Just getting through the day sometimes.
Yeah.
And the source mentions that feeling when restructuring or downsizing happens.
That initial relief, phew, it wasn't me, followed immediately by dread.
Exactly. Dread about picking up the extra workload from the people who were let go.
So you watch the clock, maybe have these internal debates about the work itself, but you nod, agree with the boss, smile again, then the commute home in reverse.
Dinner, maybe collapsing in front of the TV, falling into bed for, as the source puts it, 8 hours of blessed oblivion. And then it asks that pointed question.
And they call this making a living.
Right. It forces you to ask, do you actually come home feeling more alive, more energized? Or does it feel more like, well, making a dying?
The source puts it starkly. Aren't we killing ourselves, our health, our relationships, our sense of joy and wonder for our jobs?
It suggests we're sacrificing our lives bit by bit, often without noticing. The only markers might be, health issues or maybe finally getting that corner office, those superficial symbols.
And this daily grind, this trading away of our life energy, it gets tangled up with our identity.
Deeply. The source points out how easily we fall into defining ourselves by our jobs. We don't just say, I do plumbing, we say, I'm a plumber.
It becomes who we are, not just what we do.
And this leads to something the source calls jobism. It's a subtle idea, but powerful.
Like racism or sexism, but based on occupation.
Kinda, yeah. A sort of societal caste system. We measure our own worth by our paycheck, and we size people up, maybe at a reunion or something, based on their job title, their company car, where they live.
Where their kids go to school, even.
All those external markers become the shorthand for success, for value. The source asks, Why else would we often undervalue, say, a stay-at-home parent or a dedicated teacher compared to maybe a doctor, even if that teacher's impact is huge?
It's a really thought-provoking point.
Yeah.
So is all this striving, defining ourselves this way, actually leading to happiness? The financial picture presented alongside this is, well, not great.
Not great at all. The source cites historically low savings rates in the U.S., sometimes hovering near 0%. That alone tells you how little buffer people have.
And on the other side, massive personal debt.
Huge levels. It gives figures like average U.S. consumer credit card debt being over $3,000, household debt over $8,000, mortgage and auto debt averaging over $5,000. This debt, it argues, becomes the main shackle.
It locks you in.
It turns the 9 to 5 from a potential choice into something mandatory because, quite simply, we can't afford to quit. You have to keep earning to service the debt.
And the consequences can be devastating. There's that one statistic the source mentions.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
More Americans now declare bankruptcy than graduate from college.
Wow. Just let that sink in.
It really encapsulates the crisis. You're living in supposedly one of the richest societies ever, surrounded by stuff, yet so many feel trapped, dissatisfied, and sometimes after years of work, lose everything. And it affects everyone. It mentions white-collar workers as a fast-growing group among the jobless.
It's not just a blue-collar issue then.
Not at all. The trap is widespread.
And the source connects this personal financial struggle, this consumption pattern, to a much bigger picture, the environmental cost.
Yeah, it argues that the affluent lifestyles, particularly in developed nations, have had a really damaging effect on the planet. It points out that scientists were warning about this decades ago.
Things like water shortages, topsoil loss, global warming.
Species extinction, pollution, trash, all linked back to these consumption patterns. There's a statistic mentioned from ecological footprint studies.
Right, about exceeding the Earth's capacity.
By the early 2000s, it says humanity was consuming over 25% more than the planet could regenerate in a year. We're not living off the interest. We're spending down the planet's capital.
And our individual spending choices fuel that.
Directly. It's all connected back to that old roadmap of consumption.
Which leads perfectly into this core cultural myth the material wants to dismantle, the idea that more is better.
Oh, that's a huge one. It's so deeply ingrained, isn't it? We're taught from day one, practically, that progress means getting more. More money, more responsibility, more stuff, more prestige.
The assumption being that more equals more happiness.
But the source argues, and I think many people feel this intuitively, that often the opposite happens. The more we have, the more we want, and the less content we are. It doesn't lead to lasting satisfaction.
It gives examples of this more is better behavior, right? Things we can all probably relate to.
Definitely. Like constantly wanting to trade in a perfectly good car for a newer one. Buying clothes we don't really need just because they're new or trendy. Feeling like you need a bigger house. Upgrading your phone just because the new model is out.
Even if the old one works perfectly fine.
Exactly. And it uses historical data to show this massive increase in material possessions, comparing, say, the late 1950s to the early 2000s.
Like how few households had air conditioning or dishwashers back then.
Right. Only about 9.5% had AC, 4% had dishwashers in 1958. Fewer than 15% had more than one car.
And flash forward.
By the early 2000s, it was over half with dishwashers. 3/4 of new homes with central air, 2/3 of households owning 2 or more cars. A huge jump in material stuff.
But here's the kicker. Happiness levels didn't follow.
That's the paradox. Surveys showed the percentage of Americans saying they were very happy actually declined steadily from its peak in 1957. More stuff didn't equal more happiness.
So where did this relentless drive for more come from? The source suggests it was partly manufactured.
It argues that the shift from seeing people as citizens to seeing them primarily as consumers was, well, a deliberate invention, largely in the 20th century.
To keep the economic engine running.
Essentially, yes. After the Industrial Revolution met basic needs, growth started to slow. People even wanted shorter work weeks. This worried industrialists' slower growth and moralists' idle hands.
So the idea that human wants are insatiable was promoted.
It was cultivated. The idea that we'll always want more was encouraged to keep people buying, keep the factories humming. Even leisure became about consumption, fancy vacations, expensive hobbies.
This brings us to a really important concept the source introduces to visualize this. The fulfillment curve.
Yes, this is a key visual. It shows how initially spending money does increase fulfillment. When you're meeting basic needs, food, shelter, safety, your fulfillment goes up quite steeply.
Makes sense. Moving from scarcity to having enough feels good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the curve doesn't just keep going up forever. It hits a peak.
The point of enough.
Exactly. That peak represents having enough for your comfort and well-being. And after that peak, the curve starts to head downwards.
So spending more money actually leads to less fulfillment.
That's the crucial insight. More spending starts to create clutter, complexity, stress. It actively detracts from your well-being. Think of that image the source uses.
Being surrounded by stuff in a big house but feeling empty, maybe longing for simpler times.
Precisely. The equation money fulfillment stops working. In fact, it starts working against you. You're spending more precious life energy for things that make you less satisfied.
Okay, that's a powerful, maybe uncomfortable realization. And it sets up the need for the first practical step in this program. Step 1.
Step 1 is called financial archaeology. It's about digging into your financial past. It has two main parts. First, you calculate, as best you can, the total amount of money you have earned in your entire lifetime.
Your whole life, from the first paper route or babysitting job.
Everything. You dig out old tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, try to remember cash jobs. The goal is accuracy, getting a real sense of the total sum.
Why that specific number? What does knowing your lifetime earnings tell you?
It confronts you with the sheer volume of your life energy, all those hours, days, years that you've already traded for money. It makes it incredibly real. Then the second part is creating a personal balance sheet.
Assets minus liabilities.
Exactly. List everything you own that has real market value, cash, investments, property, significant belongings. Be honest, even about stuff maybe hidden away in storage.
That connects to the idea of clutter, right? Not just physical stuff, but maybe activities too.
Yes, the inventory makes you face what you've actually accumulated with all that life energy. Then you list everything you owe, mortgage, loans, credit cards, subtract liabilities from assets, and that's your net worth.
And the source really stresses being meticulous here. Accuracy, precision, impeccability.
It frames it as a fundamental shift, moving from maybe being a bit lax or avoidant about money stuff to approaching it with real integrity. It even suggests this practice can spill over positively into other parts of your life.
Like people losing weight or clearing messy desks just by applying this financial integrity?
That's what some people reported, yeah. It's about building awareness and total honesty in your relationship with money, not just about it.
So step 1 is really about facing the facts, your financial history and your current reality, warts and all.
It's the essential starting point, sometimes eye-opening, but necessary groundwork.
Okay, which leads us logically into chapter 2, which asks that seemingly simple but actually really deep question. Money ain't what it used to be and never was. What is money, really?
The source uses this great metaphor, looking at a city from different floors of a skyscraper, to explain the different ways we understand money.
Okay, let's start at ground level.
Street level view. Money is just physical stuff. Coins, bills, numbers in an account. It's purely transactional, buying, selling, paying bills. Financial literacy helps here, understanding interest rates, but it's only the surface.
Moving up a few floors.
You get to the neighborhood level, this is the emotional, psychological realm. Here you see your money personality. Are you a spender, a saver, a worrier, an avoider? This is shaped heavily by your upbringing, your early experiences, and this is where your money mythology lives.
Money mythology. Tell me more about that.
It's your set of deep, often unconscious beliefs about what money means to you personally. They're not always rational. Like maybe for you, money equals security, so you hoard it, or money equals power or love or freedom, or maybe money is evil, something dirty.
And these myths drive our behavior, especially under stress.
Absolutely. They reveal themselves in our actions much more than our conscious thoughts sometimes. The source uses Jason and Nedra's story here.
Right, the couple with very different backgrounds.
Exactly. Nedra grew up with financial struggles, so her myth became money. Happiness, the good life. This led her to rack up tons of credit card debt, justifying it because she was pursuing that good life.
And Jason?
His parents were counterculture types, living simply. His myth was money isn't important, so he just didn't manage it well. Accumulating his own debt, he vaguely planned to pay off someday.
So they were both in debt, but for completely opposite reasons, rooted in these unconscious beliefs.
Precisely. And when they got together, these opposing myths clashed. Understanding your own money psychology, your myths, is valuable, but the source says it's still not the whole picture.
What's the next level up the skyscraper?
The citywide view. This is the cultural level. Looking down, you see the broad societal norms, the cultural programming, the fact that most of us lack a clear functional definition of what money actually is. Like Jason and Nidra, neither knew the basic economic idea of money as a store of value. We operate on cultural assumptions, not real understanding.
And this lack of clarity, these myths, they can make us feel powerless, like money controls us.
Yes, because we tend to see money as this external thing, something out there to get, something we never have enough of, something we pin all our hopes on. This makes us feel like it's slaves.
So to break free, the source offers a radical new definition.
This is the absolute core shift. The definition is simple but profound. Money is something we choose to trade our life energy for.
Money is life energy. Wow.
It reframes everything. And life energy here isn't abstract. It's your actual finite time on this planet, the hours, minutes, seconds you have, your vitality.
So every dollar represents a chunk of your irreplaceable life that you chose to trade.
Exactly. And the power in this definition is that it puts the agency back with you. You choose how to spend your life energy. It connects money to something deeply personal and precious, your life itself.
How did seeing money this way change things for Jason and Nidra?
For Nidra, it shattered her debt denial. When she calculated her actual earnings in terms of life energy spent, we'll get to that, and compared it to her spending, she saw she was using credit cards to spend future life energy she hadn't even earned yet. It was like, the source says, ripping planks off her own ship. She was sinking.
And for Jason, the idealist who thought money didn't matter.
It was just as enlightening, as the source puts it. He realized his activism was pointless if he couldn't support himself. To be truly effective, he had to master money, because wherever he went, he needed to sustain himself. This money-life-energy equation gave them a common, undeniable ground.
If money is life energy, then the goal isn't just piling up cash. It's achieving what the source calls financial independence.
Right. And it defines FI in two ways. Practically, yes, it's having enough income from assets, not a job, to cover your needs. But more importantly, it's freedom on a psychological level.
Psychological freedom from money worries. What does that feel like?
It's freedom from all those negative money emotions. Guilt, envy, fear. Freedom from old messages about success. Freedom from feeling intimidated by finances.
Freedom from the constant temptation to buy stuff.
Yes. Immunity to the lure of the mall or online ads, not having your mood tied to the stock market. And maybe the biggest sign, that internal calculator finally shuts off.
The one constantly figuring out hours till payday, years till retirement.
That one. The source says the silence can be thundering at first because we're so used to that mental chatter. The outcome is you can go days without thinking about money. You meet challenges with creativity, not just by reaching for your wallet.
Okay, so if money is life energy, we need to know the real cost of earning it. That brings us to step 2.
Step 2, calculate your real hourly wage. And this is way more than just salary divided by hours. It includes all the hidden time and money spent because of your job.
Okay, break that down. What kind of hidden costs are we talking about?
Well, first, your actual commuting time, unpaid hours spent just getting there and back.
Yeah.
And the cost of that commute gas, car wear and tear, transit passes. Then job costuming.
Clothes, haircuts, things you only need for that specific job.
Exactly. Also, meals bought at or for work, lunches out, coffee runs, snacks that are part of the work routine, and then, controversially maybe, the time and money spent decompressing from job stress.
Like unwinding with drinks or TV because work was awful.
If it's a direct result of coping with job stress, yes.
Yeah.
Same for escape entertainment, expensive weekends or vacations, whose main purpose is just to get away from the job grind.
Even things like getting sick more often because of work stress.
That too. Time and money lost to job-related illness. Plus, time spent maintaining the job networking, looking for a new one if you're unhappy. Even the cost if job stress impacts your relationships.
The source gives a really stark example of how this calculation changes things.
It does. It shows how someone earning, say, $17 an hour on paper might find their real hourly wage, after factoring all this in, is closer to $6 an hour.
$17 down to $6. That's huge. It really changes the value proposition of the job.
Immensely. Knowing your real hourly wage clarifies your motives for working, and just seeing that number can spark change.
How does it lead to savings?
The source tells a story about someone who calculated their real wage, was shocked, and started consciously cutting those job-related costs, bringing lunch, taking the bus, rethinking work clothes, finding free ways to relax. By doing that, they effectively doubled their net earnings per hour without a raise. They reclaimed the life energy being drained by the job's hidden costs.
So step 2 reveals the true price tag in life energy terms for your paycheck.
Precisely. It lets you see if the trade-off is really worth it.
Okay, step 1, face the past and present. Step 2, calculate the real cost. Now, chapter 3 asks, where is it all going? Which is step 3.
Step 3 is the core discipline. Meticulously tracking every single cent that comes into or goes out of your life. The source calls it a transformation technology, even monetary metaphysics.
Every single cent. That sounds, well, incredibly detailed, almost obsessive.
The rule is simple. Keep track of every cent. And the method is just as simple. Keep track of every cent. The emphasis is on completeness, not fancy tools.
So I don't need special software.
You know, a small pocket notebook works fine. Or use an appointment book, maybe a notes app on your phone now. Or download bank transactions if that's easier, like the example of Mike L. did. The tool doesn't matter as much as the rigor.
That rigor again? Accuracy, precision, impeccability.
Yes, this is where your commitment is really tested. It's about shifting from maybe being casual or avoidant to being precise and honest. The source repeats that phrase, integrity is integrity is integrity. Financial integrity spills over.
It's about building that muscle of awareness and honesty.
Exactly. And crucially, the mindset is discernment, not judgment. Judgment is beating yourself up, feeling guilty, blaming. Discernment is just seeing clearly. Sorting out what's useful from what's not, what's fulfilling from what's wasteful. Just the act of writing down every expense helps you start to see which ones felt right and which ones maybe felt unnecessary or even embarrassing later.
So you track daily. Then what? All those little entries.
That leads to the second part of step 3, the monthly tabulation. At month's end, you organize and total everything up.
How do you organize it?
You create your own spending and in-clean categories and subcategories, ones that actually reflect your life. Standard budget categories might miss the nuances of where your money goes.
So you tailor it completely.
Yes. Then you slot your daily transactions into your categories. Total each one, get your total monthly income and expenses, balance your accounts, check your cash.
And there's that accuracy check equation.
Right. Money at the end should equal money at the beginning, plus income minus expenses, plus or minus any tiny errors. It verifies your tracking. The analogy used is great. Steps 1 and 2 were like reading food labels. History, cost. Step 3 is getting on the scale, facing the reality of where the money went last month.
Why are those personalized categories so important?
Because they reveal your unique patterns. The source tells about a doctor who couldn't account for 20% of his income until he created super specific subcategories and uncovered a massive unconscious spending habit on shoes. Golf shoes, tennis shoes, hiking shoes. Loads of them, barely used.
Wow. A shoe fetish revealed by categories.
Exactly. Or Stephen Loeb, whose categories reflected their values, multiple pet subcategories, specific charity categories. Steve found his junk food and lunches category showed he spent twice as much on cookies as on music, his passion. Just seeing it made him change the behavior. No therapy needed, just awareness.
What about big, irregular costs like insurance or car repairs?
The source says you learn that every month is an unusual month. You stop seeing them as exceptions and learn to incorporate them into your monthly reality instead of making excuses.
Step 3 sounds absolutely foundational, worth every minute, the source says.
It is. It's not just bean counting. It's the path to financial intelligence. Making the flow of your life energy visible. Exercising that integrity muscle. That's how you start breaking money's unconscious hold.
Okay, so once you have that clear picture from step 3, chapter 4 asks the really deep question. How much is enough? The nature of fulfillment. What is fulfillment according to this source?
It's described as more than just fleeting pleasure. It's that deep sense of satisfaction, that feeling when something is truly right. Finishing a project, enjoying a perfect moment, or feeling a purchase was genuinely worth the life energy spent.
But for a whole life to be fulfilling.
It needs purpose, a dream, a guiding vision beyond just accumulating stuff. The source really pushes you to reflect. What does a truly fulfilling life look like for you, separate from what society tells you?
And that reflection prepares you for step 4, which is called the heart of this program.
Exactly. Step 4 is where you take your monthly tabulation, all that data from step 3, and you apply consciousness and values to it using 3 specific transformative questions for each spending subcategory.
Okay, let's go through them. Question 1.
First, did I receive fulfillment, satisfaction, and value in proportion to life energy spent?
So looking at, say, eating out, you ask yourself honestly, was the enjoyment, the value I got, really equal to the hours of my life I worked to pay for it?
Precisely. This question helps you develop your own internal yardstick for fulfillment. You'll learn to tell the difference between a whim and something that genuinely satisfied a need or brought real value, leaving you feeling enough. Think of a great meal versus one you regret, or a car that perfectly suits your needs versus one bought for status that just causes stress. You rate each category. 0 for neutral, fine. Plus, if it was super fulfilling, maybe worth spending more on, and if it felt like a waste of life energy. Doing this month after month sharpens that discernment.
Makes sense. What's the second question?
Second, is this expenditure of life energy in alignment with my values and life purpose?
This is where spending becomes a mirror. Does it reflect what I actually care about?
Exactly. The source uses that great analogy of the 3 stone cutters.
Mm-hmm.
Are you just chipping rocks, a job, earning a living, sustenance, or building a cathedral, higher purpose? This question asks if your spending is helping build your cathedral, whatever that is. And purpose doesn't have to be grand. It can be small acts, creativity, service, done with intention.
The story of Tom C. illustrates this, right? The successful guy who was unhappy.
Yes. Externally successful, but felt empty. He realized his core value was contributing, helping others. His high-paying job didn't align. He took a big pay cut, started counseling, worked with a clinic. He found happiness when his spending, his work, his life energy matched his internal values. This question helps you spot those misalignments in your own spending.
Powerful. And the third question.
Third, how might this expenditure change if I didn't have to work for a living?
Ooh, that's a provocative one.
It really makes you think. It targets expenses tied directly to making and dying stuff you buy only because of your job. Commuting costs, maybe fancy clothes you hate, stress relief spending. It helps separate true needs and desires from things driven purely by the obligation to earn income. Imagine life without that obligation. What spending remains? What changes?
So you ask these 3 questions for every category, mark them, +0, then what?
You look for the patterns, especially the 8 marks. Where are you consistently spending life energy without getting fulfillment back? Where is spending misaligned with values? Which costs are purely job-related? And again, crucially, no shame, no blame. It's just information for discernment, for clarifying what matters, not for punishment or rigid rules.
The source suggests real fulfillment, beyond just having enough, comes from somewhere else.
From giving, not just getting. Once needs are met, chasing more stuff doesn't work. Having a purpose higher than yourself, contributing to family, community, art, knowledge, that's where deeper fulfillment lies. It shifts your focus away from defining yourself by your bank balance.
And this process of tracking and questioning, it helps everyone, regardless of income.
Absolutely. There's the story of Marilyn B., the caterer whose anxiety eased just from the clarity and accountability of tracking. Or the contrast between the welfare mother saving diligently for her daughter's education, clear purpose, and the homeless father impulsively buying a stereo. Accountability and purpose matter at every level.
So step 4 infuses the raw data with meaning, with consciousness.
Exactly. It connects the numbers to your actual life energy and what truly matters.
Which brings us to chapter 5, step 5, seeing progress, making life energy visible. This involves the wall chart.
Step 5 is creating your wall chart. It's basically a big graph where you plot 2 lines month by month, your total monthly income and your total monthly expenses. You keep it visible, maybe literally on a wall, or digitally where you see it often. It usually tracks several years.
What's the point of graphing it like that, making it so visible?
It turns the monthly snapshots of step 3 into a moving picture. You see, the trends over time is the gap between income and expenses widening or shrinking, or expenses trending down. It makes your whole financial relationship with your life energy visually obvious. It shows your progress, your transformation. And doing it yourself, the source suggests, really connects you to the data.
What's a typical reaction when people first plot this out and see those lines, especially the expense line?
Often, it's shock, maybe dismay or even shame, seeing how high expenses are or how little progress they've made financially. A common reaction is what the source calls the wallet fast.
Like going on a crash diet, extreme austerity.
Exactly. Driven by guilt or sudden determination, they slash spending drastically. Like first-time dieters, the source says.
But that usually doesn't last, does it?
Generally not, because it's based on willpower and deprivation, not a real shift in awareness. You haven't addressed why you were spending that way, so the old habits rebound.
So how does sustainable change happen, according to this program?
This is the really cool part. It happens almost automatically, driven by the consistent application of step 4, the 3 questions visualized on the wall chart.
Asking those questions every month changes your consciousness.
Yes. Asking about fulfillment, values, and job dependency every month for every category while seeing the big picture on your chart naturally raises your awareness. You start making different choices without feeling forced.
And expenses just start to go down without feeling deprived.
That's the claim. Automatic expense reduction through consciousness. As you become more aware of what truly serves you and what doesn't, you simply stop wanting the things that aren't aligned. You stop spending life energy on them.
Diane G's story is a great example here.
She hated her job, felt trapped by high expenses needed to maintain her lifestyle. Her first chart showed expenses often exceeding income. But as she worked the steps, asked the questions month after month, her awareness grew, her self-esteem improved, even her experience at the job got better, and her expenses started dropping naturally.
Like restaurant bills, gas, even medical costs.
Yeah, because she wasn't eating out just to cope. She moved closer to work, she felt less stressed, and didn't need to get sick. It wasn't a struggle. It just happened gradually as her relationship with money and herself shifted. Seeing the lines change on her chart became motivating.
There were other examples, too, like Ivy and her gazingus pin for clothes.
Right. Her excessive clothes spending stemmed from childhood insecurity. Tracking and questioning brought awareness, leading to a moment in a store, "What am I doing? I don't need shorts." That broke the pattern. The spending dropped because the underlying need was being addressed by the internal shifts.
Or Gordon M's expensive office, his mega gazingus pin.
He spent nearly $3,000 a month on an office for image, but the questions revealed it wasn't fulfilling or necessary. Awareness allowed him to move his office home for $750 a month, aligning spending with actual needs, freeing up huge amounts of life energy money. It wasn't a sacrifice, it was liberation.
So the chart itself isn't magic, but interacting with it, seeing the trends, combined with the monthly questioning, that's the engine.
Absolutely. Keeping it visible, engaging with it, listening to it. It drives the transformation. And the natural outcome is, as you consciously spend less than you earn, you get out of debt and start saving.
The source mentions someone visualizing debt reduction on the chart.
Yeah, using Velcro patches to show the debt melting away as she paid it off. She got debt-free in 2 years, mainly by changing her relationship with money, focusing on fulfilling activities instead of compensatory spending.
And those savings aren't just numbers, they represent financial independence.
Exactly. Savings equal courage maybe to change jobs, energy to pursue other things, security, real security, and freedom from debt, fear, and the need to work just for survival. Financial intelligence in this context is that ongoing awareness of earning, spending, saving over time. The wall chart makes that visible.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this part of our deep dive. We've covered understanding the money trap, redefining money as life energy, the crucial step of tracking every cent, evaluating spending through the lens of fulfillment and values, and finally, visualizing the whole journey on the wall chart.
That's right. These initial steps provide you with really practical tools of tracking, the questions, the chart, but they're designed for something much bigger than just managing money. They're about building deep consciousness, transforming your fundamental relationship with your own life energy, and aligning how you use it with what truly matters to you. It works regardless of how much you earn now.
So thinking about your own real hourly wage, about where you might be on that fulfillment curve, are the things you're currently trading your precious life energy for truly worth it when measured against your deepest values and your ultimate sense of fulfillment? Something to really ponder. That's right. It's quite a journey, taking us from the absolute practicalities of, conscious spending and maximizing our earning power, right through to understanding how savings can actually become capital that generates its own income and, well, what life looks like once you're financially independent.
Think of this deep dive as a detailed roadmap we're exploring together, really laid out by these chapters. Our mission today is to unpack the most important insights, the surprising facts, and maybe the truly game-changing ideas these sections hold.
Yeah.
All to help you gain a shortcut to being well-informed and perhaps spark some significant aha moments about your own life energy, your money, and your time.
Exactly. We're here to distill these sometimes complex ideas into actionable knowledge and provide a framework for thinking differently about your financial life and how it connects to your deepest values and purpose.
All right, let's unpack this. Starting with the foundation laid in Chapter 6.
Yeah.
This one centers on valuing your life energy by minimizing spending. And right off the bat, the source tackles a word that doesn't exactly spark joy for most people: frugality.
Oh, absolutely. The source starts by trying to redeem that word frugality because, let's be honest, it often conjures images of pinching pennies, deprivation, or just being
cheap.
not exactly inspiring.
It's not at all. And if you look it up in, say, Merriam-Webster, it's defined as something like economy in the expenditure of resources.
Yeah.
Which is, serviceable, practical maybe, but it completely lacks any sort of positive motivation, any spark.
Right. It feels restrictive, but what's really fascinating, where the source goes deep, is into the Latin roots of the word. It apparently shares roots with frug, meaning virtue.
Frux, meaning fruit or value, and fru, which means to enjoy or have the use of.
And that reframes the entire concept, doesn't it? It transforms frugality from this sense of deprivation into something like enjoying the virtue of getting good value for every minute of your life energy.
Wow.
Think about that phrasing. It's not about not spending. It's about ensuring that every dollar you spend, which, remember, represents your precious life energy, your time is bringing you genuine value and enjoyment.
Wow, that connection back to life energy.
Yeah.
The time you actually spend earning that money completely shifts the perspective. It makes spending a much more conscious act, I think.
Precisely. And the source argues this is really critical because we live in a culture, particularly in places like North America, that's just dominated by more is better and it's never enough mentality. It even suggests we're often mislabeled as materialists.
Wow.
Well, because we acquire mountains of stuff, right?
Right.
But we rarely seem to stop to truly enjoy it. We just move on to the next thing.
That's powerful. It raises the question, are we buying things because we genuinely enjoy the thing itself or because of what it symbolizes? Status, success, that fleeting sense of worth.
Exactly. The source suggests this constant cycle of chasing the next coveted acquisition actually prevents us from appreciating and enjoying what we already have. It's like being on an endless treadmill.
So the frugality presented here isn't about sacrifice at all. It's about balance. The source compares it to the Greek golden mean, the right use of your money, your time, your energy, space, possessions.
Like Goldilocks.
Right, like Goldilocks finding the porridge that's just right. Not too much, not too little, but enough. That perfect amount.
It's about efficiency, really. Efficiency in harvesting happiness from your world. It's about ensuring nothing is wasted or left unused, maximizing the value from every single resource you possess. And this kind of creative frugality isn't just practical. The source frames it as an expression of self-esteem. You're honoring the life energy you invested to acquire those things.
That definitely moves the concept from feeling like a burden to feeling like empowerment. It's not about lacking something. It's about actively choosing value.
It absolutely is. And from this sort of philosophical foundation, the source moves into really practical strategies. But it deliberately presents them not as trendy, hottest tips that change every week, but as time-tested wisdom that holds true regardless of the economic climate or the latest app.
Yeah, it gives us a little historical context, too, noting how, historically, necessity forced economic conservatism on most people. It wasn't really a choice.
Right. And the Industrial Revolution complicated things by abstracting the relationship between your labor and the goods you buy.
Right.
You didn't make the shoe, you just paid for it with hours from a job that might feel totally disconnected.
The internet. You mentioned apps. The internet feels like a double-edged sword here.
Totally. It makes saving easier because you can research and compare prices endlessly, right? But it makes it infinitely harder because it presents just endless opportunities to buy things instantly 24/7. So the source wisely decides not to chase the latest online deal-finding tool, recognizing the web changes daily. Instead, it really focuses on the overarching perspective and the creative ideas that underpin saving money principles that will work whether you're using coupons or crypto or whatever comes next.
One interesting point made is the rise of green consumption. Buying environmentally friendly products, it sounds great, right? But the source throws out a caution.
Yep, be careful with that one.
Right. Beware of using this as just another excuse to shop. Replacing perfectly functional items with supposedly greener new ones might actually have a higher environmental cost in manufacturing and disposal than simply using the old one up until it's truly unusable. They even point out that some older appliances were built like tanks, designed to last for decades, unlike maybe some modern equivalents.
This ties directly back to valuing what you have and focusing on enough. The sheer volume of things we consume has an environmental cost, period. So less overall spending inherently means fewer products purchased, which reduces your environmental footprint. The fundamental question becomes, do I need this at all? Before you even consider which version is the greenest.
That's a really important distinction.
Especially relevant, they note, when you're facing things like skyrocketing energy costs, which might force lifestyle adaptations that don't involve buying anything new, but simply changing behaviors.
And the source also highlights the power of community solutions, things like sharing resources, tools, everyday objects. This idea, which might have seemed radical or maybe only for those without means in the past, is apparently moving much more mainstream.
Yeah, partly driven by rising costs, for sure. They cite things like public transportation ridership spiking when gas prices shoot up, referencing a Christian Science Monitor report from back in 2008, and how online platforms like Wikipedia, Flickr, YouTube have totally changed norms around sharing information and content. Sharing, at least digitally, has become normalized.
So these community-based approaches show creative ways to meet needs and access resources without the financial and often environmental cost of everyone owning one of everything.
Exactly. It's a bit like a return to old-fashioned barn raising, but maybe in a modern, sometimes digital context.
Okay, let's get into the really brass tacks tips. The source provides a numbered list of specific strategies for minimizing spending. These are the actionable things.
Right. And these are principles that sound simple, maybe even obvious, but their impact can be profound if you consistently apply them.
Okay, number 1, stop trying to impress other people.
This is huge, and maybe a little uncomfortable for some to confront. The source makes a blunt point, but it's likely true. Other people are probably too preoccupied with trying to impress you or worrying about their own stuff to even notice your efforts. Or worse, they might actually resent you if you appear to be constantly outdoing them.
Yeah, that hits home. It brings in that historical perspective again, referencing Thorstein Veblen's 1899 classic, The Theory of the Leisure Class and the term conspicuous consumption.
Right. The idea, which Stuart Chase summarized really concisely apparently, is that so much of our buying is done primarily to display status, to show off. Once you truly internalize this, realizing you might be spending your precious life energy on external validation that might not even be landing the way you think, the drive to purchase based on that external pressure can really diminish.
It frees up your life energy for things that genuinely matter to you, not just things you think matter to others.
Absolutely. Okay, tip number 2. Take care of what you have.
This seems almost too simple, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's so often overlooked in our culture of disposability and easy credit. Everything feels replaceable.
It starts with the most fundamental possession, our own bodies. Practicing preventive care, like, basics, flossing and brushing, can save thousands in future dental bills. Eating wisely, focusing on foods that provide actual energy and health, rather than just satisfying immediate taste buds, can prevent far more expensive medical issues down the line. It's about treating your body like the irreplaceable asset it is.
But it absolutely extends to our material possessions, too. The source points out how easy it is to neglect basic maintenance or repairs because we have this underlying belief that there's always more where that came from.
But that mindset is incredibly costly, both financially and often environmentally. More costs money, and more may not in the long run be available, the source warns. Simple things like buying maintenance supplies at the hardware store before something breaks completely, or learning basic repair skills yourself, are part of this principle.
Which leads directly into tip number 3, wear it out.
Just think about that phrase. When was the last time you truly wore something out before replacing it?
Good question. The source suggests that the relentless cycles of the fashion industry, or even just simple boredom, often push us to replace things long before they've reached the end of their functional life.
Yeah. The challenge here is to survey your possessions, your electronics, furniture, clothing, kitchen gadgets, linens, whatever, and honestly ask yourself, are you upgrading or duplicating out of want or maybe just habit, or are you genuinely replacing items that are no longer usable?
The source poses a thought experiment.
Yeah.
How much would you save over your lifetime if you use things just 20% longer?
Right. Like if you replaced towels every 2.5 years instead of every 2, or kept your car for 4 years instead of 3, maybe bought a new winter coat every third winter instead of the second. Those small extensions add up significantly over decades.
So before any purchase, the critical question to internalize from this principle is,
Yeah.
do I already have one of these that is in perfectly usable condition? Be honest with yourself.
Okay, number 4. Do it yourself. DIY.
Yes. This speaks to reclaiming skills that seem to have, atrophied across generations for many people. Can you change your car's oil? Fix a leaky faucet? Prepare your own taxes? Make a thoughtful handmade gift instead of buying something generic.
Change a bike tire. Bake bread from scratch. Build a simple shelf. Refinish a piece of furniture. Grow some of your own food, even if it's just herbs on a windowsill. Hem your own pants. Maybe even cut your own hair or a family member's. Organize a community project.
There are so many possibilities. The source traces the historical reasons these skills became less common in the average household. The Industrial Revolution, taking production out of the home.
Running parents in factories.
Mandatory public education, prioritizing other subjects. Grandparents maybe moving into rest homes instead of living with extended family and passing skills down.
Right. More parents working outside the home, reducing the time or perceived economic feasibility for one parent to stay home and teach these things. Even the decline of home economics and shop classes in schools plays a role.
And when these practical skills aren't passed down or learned easily, we become completely reliant on paying others for services that were once pretty commonplace DIY tasks. Doing it yourself saves money directly by substituting your own time and effort, your life energy, for someone else's paid labor.
Tip number 5, anticipate your needs.
This is all about forethought and planning, isn't it? By anticipating what you'll likely need in the future, you can time your purchases to coincide with sales, potentially saving anywhere from, say, 20% to 50% off the usual price.
But this requires awareness. You have to be keeping an eye on things online discounts, sale flyers, Sunday ads, using price comparison sites. And it also requires discernment. You need to verify that a seasonal sale or special offer is a real reduction in price, not just marketing hype.
Right. The source's example of noticing a tire is wearing out before it actually blows is perfect. That awareness gives you lead time to wait for a phenomenal tire sale, rather than being forced to buy at full price in an emergency situation. Consciousness of your upcoming needs is fundamental.
And anticipating needs is also presented as a powerful antidote to impulse buying. The source offers a clever corollary to Parkinson's law. You know, the one that says work expands to fill the time allowed.
Yeah.
Well, their version is needs expand to encompass whatever you want to buy on impulse.
Huh. That's good.
So when you see something tempting, the advice is to be scrupulously honest with yourself. Have you genuinely anticipated needing this item, or is it just an impulse purchase trying to disguise itself as a necessity?
That requires some real self-awareness. Okay, and finally, tip number 6. Buy it for less.
This sounds obvious, maybe, but the source makes a key point. Prices aren't some cosmic constant fixed in stone. They cost what you end up paying. The location where you buy something and even how you pay can often influence the final price more than differences in inherent quality sometimes.
They really champion comparison shopping, even using the phone, which sounds a bit old school now, but the principle holds. Once you've identified the exact item you need, contacting different retailers can reveal an amazing range of prices for the very same product.
Definitely. And it also suggests giving your favorite local independent vendors a chance to match prices you find elsewhere. You might keep your business local and still get the best price.
The examples of shaving 33% off the price of a Toyota Tercel demonstrator model or a similar percentage off a Honda Insight by finding a previous year's model. Those are powerful real-world illustrations that this strategy really works.
As the source puts it, some things never change, like phone comparison shopping. Or maybe now it's web comparison shopping, but the idea is the same.
And bargaining. It's not just for cars or houses, apparently.
No. The source presents it as a time-honored tradition that's still applicable in many retail situations. You can ask for a discount for paying cash sometimes, or for buying an item with minor imperfections, or for buying multiples. You could even ask for sale price if the sale just ended yesterday or is about to start tomorrow.
The mantra is simple. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. What's the harm in asking politely?
Exactly. And the anecdote about the running shoes, a $95 list price shoe, already on sale for $39.99, and then purchased for $28 just by asking if they'd take $30. That's a fantastic concrete example. It shows that just asking can pay off, especially maybe at independent stores where owners or managers have more flexibility than chain store employees might.
And the suggestion is, if you find a lower price at a chain, tell your preferred local store and see if they'll match it to keep your business. Good advice.
So beyond these specific tips, the source briefly touches on other avenues for saving, like utilizing thrift stores and garage sales.
Right. But the caution here is critical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beware of buying things just because they're cheap if you don't actually need them.
Oh, definitely. That's the quickest way to fill your house with clutter and still spend money unnecessarily, defeating the whole purpose. Thrift stores have become quite popular and offer a huge variety, while consignment stores usually offer higher quality but also higher prices.
Garage sales can be great for bigger items, like appliances or furniture at very low prices. The source advises going early for the best selection, even if you risk being shooed away for being too early.
Yeah, the early bird. Or going late, when sellers are often much more motivated to unload items for almost any price just to get rid of them. Swap meets and flea markets are also mentioned, but the warning there is to really know your prices beforehand, as some vendors might actually charge more than retail sometimes.
Okay, so bringing this whole chapter on minimizing spending to a close, the source introduces a really important concept: substitution.
Right. Substitution is presented as a creative way to meet your underlying needs without necessarily relying on consumption, on buying things. It's rooted in the understanding that most of our deepest human needs, the things that truly make us feel fulfilled, aren't material in the first place.
They bring in Max Neve's list of fundamental human needs, things like subsistence, protection, affection, understanding, participation, idleness, which is interesting, creation, identity, freedom.
Yeah, a broad range. And the argument is that trying to fill these profound, non-material needs with material possessions inevitably leads to an unquenchable appetite for false solutions. You just keep buying, but you never feel truly satisfied.
That powerful quote from Donella Meadows really drives this home. People don't need enormous cars. They need respect. People don't need electronic equipment. They need something worthwhile to do with their lives. People need identity, community, challenge, acknowledgement, love, and joy. Trying to buy these feelings with material goods just creates psychological emptiness, not fulfillment.
So substitution isn't about deprivation. It's framed as creative exploration. When you feel that urge to shop or buy something, the practice is to pause, trace that feeling back to the underlying need it's trying to fulfill. Am I bored, lonely, seeking validation? And then ask yourself if creativity or some non-consumption activity could meet that need better or maybe even more authentically.
Examples they give are things like writing for self-expression, instead of buying a new gadget to feel productive, gardening for that sense of creation and connection to nature, instead of redecorating your house again.
Or exploring local parks instead of planning an expensive trip, or simply observing the world around you, being present, instead of scrolling through online shopping sites to fill time.
The really fundamental shift, isn't it? From a reactive consumption mindset to a proactive, creative mindset for finding fulfillment. That was Chapter 6. All focused on consciously bringing expenses down.
Which leads us naturally then into Chapter 7, where the focus flips entirely to the other side of the equation. Valuing your life energy by maximizing income.
Okay, so after mastering minimizing expenses, Step 7 is about increasing your income. How does this tie back into valuing your life energy?
Well, the source defines this step as exchanging your life energy for the highest pay that's consistent with your health and your integrity. And it offers a really simple, almost radical key insight here.
Which is?
The only purpose of paid employment is getting paid.
Wow, that feels very blunt.
It is, and I think deliberately so. Money is the single thing you are trading your precious, finite life energy for in the specific context of a paid job. Now, this isn't framed as being about greed.
Okay.
It's framed as being about self-respect, ensuring you get a fair exchange for that finite resource, your time, your effort, your life force that you are investing in earning money. It has to be worth it in monetary terms.
And the source suggests this perspective is a direct counterpoint to that feeling many people have about their jobs, that sense of making a dying, where the job feels like it's draining life force rather than being a fair trade for the money earned.
Exactly. Which brings us to a crucial redefinition of work itself. The source argues there are really two distinct aspects to what we often lump together as work. One is the paid employment where you earn wages.
Okay.
The other is the work we do to fulfill all the other purposes in our lives, things like contributing, creating, learning, caring for others, pursuing passions, the stuff that gives life meaning beyond money.
And for so many people, their paid employment feels like making a dying precisely because it doesn't align with that deeper sense of purpose beyond the paycheck.
Yeah.
Spending, 8-10 hours a day, 5 days a week, maybe 50 weeks a year for decades. That's an immense investment of life energy.
Huge. And if it's only for the paycheck, it raises some really big questions. Like how much money do you actually need to live a fulfilled life, according to your own definition? Is your current job providing that amount efficiently? Are you maybe undervalued for the life energy you're investing? Or, conversely, are you earning more than you truly need?
That's an interesting one, if you're earning more than you need.
Yeah, if you are, what is the purpose of that extra money? Does it have one? If it has no real purpose aligned with your values, would you maybe prefer to work less, to have more time for what brings you joy off the job? If that extra money does have a purpose, maybe saving for FI or supporting a cause, does that purpose bring enough fulfillment to justify the specific hours and stresses of the job itself?
The source does acknowledge this perspective is maybe harder to embrace if you're genuinely struggling just to make ends meet. They reference a 2008 poll showing low-income workers actually prioritize more time off over more money. interestingly.
Right. But the core idea is that our overall fulfillment comes from the entire tapestry of our lives, our inner sense of meaning, our connections, our contributions, not just the hours spent at a paid job. So separating work, what you do, your skills, your effort, from wages, the money you get paid for it, allows you to see this distinction much more clearly and to value your life energy both inside and outside of your paid job. The source even says mistaking work for wages is one of the primary ways we lose ourselves because we end up defining our entire identity solely by our paid role.
And this redefinition, this separation, has some stunning implications, doesn't it? It allows you to reclaim your authentic self if your job sort of forces you into a personality or behaviors or those unspoken cultural norms that aren't truly you. They mention things like corporate expectations, maybe mandatory power lunches or working excessive overtime just for visibility, not real productivity.
Yeah, exactly. When you disconnect your sense of self and fulfillment from your wages, you can operate from the inside out. You can still perform your job effectively and professionally, absolutely, but without giving up your authentic self in the process. You can be responsible and accountable, but your primary loyalty is ultimately to being able to live with yourself with your integrity intact.
And if your job environment compromises that?
Well, the source suggests you then have the clarity and maybe the internal permission to consider making a change.
The source really brings this to life with several compelling stories of people who went through this process of redefining their relationship with work and income.
They really do. Marcy M's story is just incredible. Here's a single mother of 4 starting from a really chaotic life after leaving a marriage. She found a small sense of control just by tracking her finances on the wall chart, that visual tool we've mentioned before where you plot your income and expenses over time. She started with a temporary agency, but she wasn't passive about it. She ruthlessly evaluated every single opportunity, not just by the hourly rate, but by the real cost in terms of her life energy. The effort of learning new software, the time lost commuting, the stress from coworkers' personalities.
She was applying that real hourly wage concept.
Exactly. And by consciously applying this evaluation, she systematically doubled her income from minimum wage to about $14 an hour, which was a huge leap. But she didn't stop there. She was always looking for permanent positions, always networking, making every contact count.
And her willingness to seize opportunities paid off unexpectedly, didn't it?
Massively. She was volunteering at a medical conference, and the executive director quit suddenly on the first day. Marcia, just being part of the volunteer team, stepped in immediately to help fill the gap, keep things running.
And her competence and willingness to serve didn't go unnoticed. When the board searched for a permanent replacement, Marcia was the clear choice. For her last 2 years before reaching FI, her hourly pay soared to over $24 an hour. That's $48,000 a year back then.
Which was so far beyond what she ever thought possible as a former hotel maid that, the source notes, she literally had to tape extra graph paper onto her wall chart just to fit the line for her income. Her earnings went, quite literally, off the chart.
That's amazing. It really highlights the power of being actively engaged in your income journey, constantly evaluating opportunities against your life energy, and being prepared to step up when unexpected possibilities arise.
It wasn't just luck. It was absolutely preparation meeting opportunity.
Then there's Rosemary the Nurse. She consciously used that disconnect between work and wages to pursue goals completely separate from her primary job as an activities director at a retirement home, things like travel, writing, projects for the planet.
Right. She enjoyed her job, but she didn't want it to be her entire life's definition. She realized that earning more money now would allow her to achieve those other non-job goals sooner.
But instead of taking on a higher stress primary job, she did something different.
Yeah, she took a flexible on-call second job doing audio duplication. She could put in several hours a week. The people were apparently congenial, the work was low stress, and the hourly pay was good. So even though she was working more than 40 hours a week overall, her clarity about her goals kept her energy and spirits high. It wasn't about the total hours, it was about the purpose those hours served in getting her closer to her FI goals.
And the carpenter, Steve W., whose story we briefly heard back in Chapter 6, he had a major breakthrough with this idea of a finite period of time working for money.
That's right. He'd known the principles of the program, apparently even tracked expenses, but it all felt a bit abstract. Truly grasping, that he wasn't destined to work forever, but for a defined period to reach financial independence. That was genuinely liberating for him. His energy for his carpentry just soared, and his productivity increased dramatically.
And wanting more time for his writing aspirations, he started bidding his remodeling jobs significantly higher, fully expecting to get less work as a result.
But a surprising thing happened. People were apparently so impressed with his past craftsmanship and maybe his newfound passion and confidence that they were willing to pay the higher prices. He ended up with all the work he wanted, but at much higher wages per hour.
So the hours he spent on paid employment went down.
Right. Hours down, income went up, his anxiety went down, his peace of mind went up, and suddenly his time available to write seemed boundless. He reflected later and wondered, was this just luck? Or was it a direct result of his increased self-esteem and valuing his own work and time differently?
That's a powerful question. And then Chris N's story, the doctor, highlights the challenges, even in seemingly successful, high-paying careers.
Yeah, she worked her way up, but found the system of modern medicine, the 100-hour work weeks, the lack of sleep, just didn't suit her personally. Work was all-consuming, leaving no time to even think about, let alone track, money consciously. Marrying another doctor simply doubled their pattern of unconscious accumulation, multiple houses, cars, exotic investments.
They followed the basic rule of spending less than they earned, but without tracking or conscious choice, they sort of confused busyness and accumulation with actual security or fulfillment.
Exactly. And fulfillment for Chris meant confronting her financial beliefs and how they clashed with her desire to practice medicine differently. She actually preferred non-invasive procedures and patient education, which offered lower income per patient compared to the expensive procedures that really paid the bills in the conventional system.
She had a pivotal realization. Either I have to do medicine differently or not do it at all. And asking her husband that key question, what would you do if you didn't have to work for money, revealed how deeply tied many people are to their jobs for identity, even without fulfillment. He couldn't even answer.
Which led her to understand the need to individuate, as the source puts it, to live her own life aligned with her values, even within a conventional marriage. This growing insight led her to reevaluate her clinic and face the uncomfortable truth that shifting towards prevention might mean her staff earning less, which is a difficult conversation.
These stories, really across the source, show that reaching fulfillment and maximizing income consistent with integrity often requires addressing those ingrained money myths, finding purpose beyond just the job description, and being willing to make sometimes difficult changes.
Even with challenging circumstances like, costly teenagers or maybe unsympathetic partners, as mentioned, the real power of applying these steps is that it explicitly splits apart that work equals wages formula, empowering people to redesign their lives to match their true values and purpose.
To help guide you, the listener, in this process, the source provides a checklist of 4 essential factors for finding high-paying, high-integrity work.
Yeah, these factors provide a kind of roadmap for seeking or even creating work that not only compensates you fairly for your life energy, but also feels aligned with your deepest values and purpose.
Okay, the first factor is purpose.
This is the absolute foundation. You need a clearly defined purpose. Why are you looking for work in the first place? Why this particular kind of work? And maybe on a deeper level, what is your deepest desire for your one wild and precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver asked? And how might this paid work fit into or support that?
Second is intention.
This is the will, the determination to meet your goal. The source notes that weak intention, procrastination, or lack of focus often stem from disabling beliefs about yourself. I'm not good enough, who would hire me? Or maybe just a lack of clarity about what you really want.
So you need to define the ideal job clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
What skills will you use? What is your monetary goal, understood as a real hourly wage considering all costs? What are your geographical needs, your ethical requirements, your desired working conditions? Incorporating your real hourly wage calculation from step 2 earlier in the source is crucial here. A high-paying job might seem great on paper, but if it requires a long, expensive commute or high work-related expenses, your real hourly wage might actually be lower than a seemingly lower-paying job closer to home.
That makes sense. Third is willingness.
This is the willingness to do whatever it takes within your ethical boundaries, of course. The research, the networking, even if you find it uncomfortable, the persistence in following up, being assertive in salary negotiations, being creative and inventive in finding opportunities, the source is very clear. The job world doesn't simply arrive on your doorstep. You have to actively engage with it.
And the fourth factor is consciousness.
Right. You need to remain highly aware throughout the whole journey. Pay attention to leads, know when to cut your losses on dead ends, actively interview people not just for open positions, but to gather information and uncover maybe hidden opportunities. Go directly to the person who has the hiring power if you possibly can.
The source even suggests you might need to create your own job.
Yeah. By identifying a need within a company or organization and demonstrating how your unique skills can fill that need. It's an active, interactive process. You plot a course, but you stay open and adaptable to the unexpected turns and opportunities that arise.
So by consciously applying these 4 factors, purpose, intention, willingness, and consciousness, you empower yourself to find or create paid work that not only pays well, but also feels aligned with your values. It makes the exchange of your life energy feel less like a burden and more like a deliberate step towards your larger goals.
Exactly.
Okay, so we focused on consciously minimizing expenses in Chapter 6 and strategically maximizing income in Chapter 7. Chapter 8 then brings these two together and introduces what might be the most pivotal concept in the entire source material, savings versus capital and the crossover point.
Yes. As you successfully apply the principles from the previous chapters, consciously creating that gap between your income and your expenses, the result is a growing surplus of money each month or each year.
And conventionally, we just call that savings, right? It's money put aside, maybe for a down payment, a vacation, or just a rainy day fund.
Exactly. Savings often feels like money just sitting there passively, maybe earmarked for future spending or just general security. A nominal person, someone following the conventional path without this FI framework, might see their savings simply as a pool of funds they're slowly accumulating for a specific purchase or maybe a retirement date defined by society or their employer.
But the source makes a crucial, really powerful distinction here. FI thinking calls that gap capital.
Capital. And in this context, capital is defined specifically as money that makes more money. It's not passive, it's active. It works for you, generating income potentially just like your job does, but without you trading more of your active time for it.
So the source draws a clear line between passive savings just sitting there and active capital being put to work.
Right. Putting savings in a standard bank account might earn you a little bit of interest, maybe, but that's often framed as just a minor byproduct. Putting capital into an interest-bearing instrument or some kind of investment vehicle is a deliberate act with the explicit expectation of generating income from that money.
They briefly mentioned the 2 basic forms of investment here.
Yeah, speculation, things like stocks or real estate where you hope the value increases so you can eventually sell for a profit, and debt instruments like loans or bonds where you lend your capital to someone else and receive interest payments in return with the principal paid back later.
And while they promise a deeper dive into the specifics of investment in Chapter 9, the core idea established right here in Chapter 8 is transformative. Your savings, no matter how small they might seem initially, are potential capital that can be put to work earning money for you, ultimately freeing up your life energy.
And this is where the wall chart becomes even more powerful than just tracking income and expenses.
Right, that visual tool. You track your monthly income line, your monthly expenses line. The difference between them is your monthly savings, which you add to your total accumulated capital.
Exactly. But now you add a new line to that chart.
Yeah.
Your monthly investment income. And you calculate this using a formula they provide, your total accumulated capital multiplied by the current long-term investment rate, divided by 12 months to get a monthly figure.
They suggest using a conservative safe rate for this calculation, like the rate on long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, just to get a baseline. They use 4% in their examples for simplicity, while acknowledging that actual rates fluctuate significantly over time.
Right. And this new line on your chart, your monthly investment income, unlike your income and expense lines, which might zig and zag a bit but tend to stay relatively flat over the long term if your lifestyle is stable, this line curves upward. It starts slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but it accelerates over time.
That upward curve is the magic of compound interest, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Your capital earns income, and that income gets added back to your capital, which then earns more income in the next period, and so on and so on. It builds on itself, creating exponential growth over time. It's powerful stuff.
And here's where the crossover point comes in. By looking at your wall chart and projecting that accelerating monthly investment income line into the future,
and having established a stable, conscious level for your monthly expenses through all the work you did in Chapter 6, allowing you to project that expense line forward as well, maybe just as a relatively flat line.
at some foreseeable point, those 2 lines will cross on your chart. The monthly investment income line will rise above the monthly expenses line. That specific point, visible on your own chart, is what the source calls the crossover point.
And what that crossing means, fundamentally, is profound. The income generated passively by your investment capital is now sufficient to cover your total monthly expenses. At that moment, you are no longer relying on income from active paid employment to survive. You have reached financial independence.
This is the point Steve W., the carpenter we talked about, realized when he grasped his work had a finite period. Seeing this point emerge on his own chart made it real, tangible. He wasn't working forever. He was working towards this specific, achievable point in time.
The source calls this realization, this visual projection, a secondary rocket that provides incredible propulsion toward FI, especially for those whose primary motivation might be to leave conventional paid employment. That finite period creates a powerful psychological pull, like, as they say, a horse catching the scent of its home stables after a long journey.
And reaching this crossover point, whether it takes you 5 years or 20, whether you hit it at age 30 or 65, provides massive, ongoing motivation throughout the journey. It fundamentally reframes how you see your life, not defined solely by your job, but as something much bigger with possibilities beyond it.
Yeah, they mentioned Marcy M. reaching 65 and becoming eligible for Social Security as just additional income, like icing on her FI cake, adding on top of her already sufficient investment income stream. It was and then some.
The source rightfully describes reaching financial independence, actually hitting that crossover point, as a mighty feat.
And it really is when you consider the transformation required. By this point in the process, if you've followed the steps, you've likely restructured your entire life around what you truly value. You've replaced financial fictions and assumptions with hard facts from your own life. You've deeply challenged old beliefs about money, work, and yourself. You've defined exactly what enough means for you, not for society.
You've become accountable for how you use your life energy, developed an internal compass, an internal yardstick for making financial decisions. You've explored your deepest values and purpose, and considered the impact of your consumption on the world around you.
And all of this, the source emphasizes, was accomplished by consciously applying those 4 factors we discussed from Chapter 7. Clearly defining your purpose, having the intention to achieve your goals, possessing the willingness to do what it takes, and maintaining consciousness and awareness throughout the entire process.
And the source makes a crucial point immediately after celebrating this mighty feat. You can stop working for money, but you don't have to.
This is key. FI doesn't automatically mean mandatory retirement or stopping all forms of productive activity. It simply means the necessity of working for a paycheck is gone. The compulsion is removed.
So if your job was draining or robotic or stifling, you now have the genuine freedom to just walk away and explore other pathways.
Right. And initially, the source suggests that might mean simply enjoying the absence of external demands, sleeping without an alarm clock, not wearing a watch, maybe staying in your bathrobe all day for a week, just enjoying the feeling of playing hooky for a little while, savoring the freedom.
But the source notes that most people find that complete idleness is actually far less appealing in reality than they might have imagined beforehand. Once they've savored that initial freedom, they typically start dusting off other dreams, passions, and aspirations that were maybe put on hold during the years of conventional employment.
You might even continue doing the core work that you genuinely love, your craft, your profession, but perhaps in a different context, free from the constraints, demands, or stifling aspects of a traditional job structure, or maybe fewer hours, or on your own terms.
And once you are past the crossover point, with enough passive income to cover your expenses, the source highlights voluntary action as becoming a truly powerful option for filling your time and energy.
Yeah, and this isn't limited to just formal volunteering at a nonprofit, though it certainly includes that. It's the absolute freedom to choose what you do with your days. You could continue to focus solely on your own needs and desires, perhaps consuming more now that you have the means, or you can direct your life energy towards something larger than yourself, contributing to others, to your community, or to the world in some way.
The choice shifts fundamentally, doesn't it? From having to earn money to choosing how to apply your life energy, consume or create becomes a real choice.
Exactly. And the source illustrates this with a compelling chart, figure 8 to 9 apparently, showing that once you have enough income to cover your basic needs and comforts, a conscious commitment to giving, whether that's giving your time, your skills, or your resources, is what makes the fulfillment line on the chart shoot straight up dramatically. That's the profound impact voluntary action and contribution can have on your sense of meaning and well-being, according to this framework.
The examples here are really inspiring. Ron, the successful tea maker who was already financially established.
Yeah, he was deeply affected by witnessing suffering, specifically seeing children dying from preventable diseases like dehydration.
He wasn't a medical professional or a traditional fundraiser.
Right.
His skill was making really good tea. So he went back home and started manufacturing tea again, but with a completely different purpose driving him.
Since he could live comfortably on the interest from his capital, his FI income, he decided to donate all the proceeds from his new tea company to a relief agency providing medicine for children.
100%. And his simple tea company raised $30,000 for refugees in its very first year. Ron reflected on the beauty of its simplicity. It's so simple, it's ridiculous. The catch is there is no catch. His venture thrived because people liked the tea, not necessarily because they felt obligated to donate to a charity, and it was fueled entirely by his personal desire to contribute beyond his own needs.
It's a fantastic example. Then there's Ted and Martha P. They reached FI relatively quickly, but initially weren't entirely sure what their higher purpose was beyond their jobs. Ted, who would work in real estate, tried volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, but found the structure wasn't quite the right fit for him personally.
So his inspiration came from redefining his existing skill set. He decided he could sell real estate for love, as he put it, donating a significant portion, 40% of his commissions, to causes that his clients and he mutually believed in. It created this win-win-win model.
Meanwhile, Martha, who prioritized parenting, made staying home with their son a conscious career choice, and they both maximized their time at home. They continue to explore various activities, but now none of it is driven by necessity. It's all about choice and alignment with their values. Martha's quote is lovely. "Security doesn't come from outer symbols. FI feels less like steering and more like going for the ride. The blessings just keep coming." Work becomes about discovering how to express your understanding of life, not just making money.
And Jacques Blakes and David Heitmiller. Their first project after reaching FI was to write the book Getting a Life, sharing stories of other fires, viewing it primarily as a service to help others on the path.
Ironically, they received a hefty advance for the book. Following the lead of the source's original authors, Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin, they decided to donate a remarkable 95% of their advance to the New Roadmap Foundation, which then used those funds to provide grants for projects supporting a sustainable future.
Wow, 95%. And even years later, when they found they needed some extra income for various reasons, they explicitly stated that they had no regrets about that substantial donation.
No, because it was aligned with their values at the time. They pursued new paths. David does some handyman work part-time. Jacques became a yoga teacher. They travel. They deeply enjoy grandparenting. They pursue creative outlets. Their summary captures the essence. Life is full, good, and financially secure. It's not about deprivation. It's about intentionality.
Finally, the source highlights something perhaps less tangible but deeply important. Time with people, family, friends, community becomes a priority for many for years.
Yes. Martha M., again, after reaching FI, consciously used her newly liberated time and mental clarity to focus on addressing and healing relationships with her children, her siblings, and her mother. These relationships had often been put on maintenance status, as the source puts it, during her demanding working years, simply because she didn't have the bandwidth, the time, or the energy to invest deeply.
And this conscious investment of time and attention into her relationships brought her something invaluable, a profound sense of peace of mind, something the source points out no job, however prestigious or lucrative, could ever truly provide.
It's a powerful illustration that while financial independence provides the crucial freedom of choice, true fulfillment often comes from investing in these non-monetary forms of wealth, particularly deep connections with others.
Absolutely. Okay, so that incredible journey through chapters 6, 7, and 8, from mindful spending and maximizing income through the crossover point and the freedom it unlocks, brings us finally to chapter 9, which the source calls the final pillar, security.
Right. Step 9 directly confronts what is perhaps the biggest underlying fear driving so many of our economic decisions. That fear of the unknown future. The core question boiling down to, will I truly continue to have enough money over time? Achieving security is all about ensuring your capital can reliably support you for the rest of your life, navigating all the inevitable uncertainties.
And one of the major uncertainties that can really erode the purchasing power of your carefully accumulated capital is inflation. The source discusses how inflation is typically measured by the Consumer Price Index, or CPI.
Yes, but it offers a significant and I think quite interesting critique of the CTI as a true measure of your personal cost of living, particularly if you're actively applying the conscious spending principles from Chapter 6. The CPI, as they explain it, is an index based on the average price changes of a fixed basket of goods and services that a typical urban consumer might buy.
A fixed basket. So it assumes you keep buying the same things.
Exactly. And because of that, it doesn't fully account for several key factors, like infrequent but large purchases, replacing a refrigerator, a car, things you don't buy every month. It also doesn't adequately account for technological improvements that often give you much more value for your money over time. Think about how much better and cheaper a computer or TV is now compared to 20 years ago, even adjusted for price.
Or the longer lifespan of some products due to better quality, maybe.
Right. Or, crucially, the power of consumer behavior, your ability, especially as a conscious spender, to switch to cheaper alternatives when the price of one particular item skyrockets, like buying apple juice when orange juice prices go through the roof. You adapt.
And importantly, for a financially intelligent shopper applying those creative substitution tips from Chapter 6, the CPI doesn't really account for cultural changes, technological leaps, or your learned ability to meet needs without buying anything new at all sometimes.
So the source argues that because of all these factors, the official CPI often overstates the actual impact of inflation on your personal finances, at least for those who are consciously managing their money and applying flexibility and creativity.
However, there's a but, isn't there?
Yes, there's a significant but. The source is careful to acknowledge that real and sometimes very significant inflation absolutely does exist, especially in certain key areas that are near essential and harder to substitute away from. It specifically cites the enormous increases seen over decades in things like healthcare costs, college tuition, and housing prices in many areas.
And those costs can significantly impact your ability to maintain your chosen lifestyle on a fixed FI income stream, potentially forcing difficult decisions, perhaps even extreme measures, like, as mentioned in Claire and Mike's story later in the source, going without health insurance for a time.
So the takeaway is, while the CPI might be a flawed measure for your personal experience, inflation is still a real risk. Your investment capital needs to somehow outpace or at least keep up with the inflation affecting your essential costs to ensure long-term security. The question then becomes, how do you manage this risk through your investments?
This is where the source transitions to investing as the primary tool for this long-term security. It starts by presenting Joe Dominguez's original strategy from the 1960s and 90s, which was based on 6 very strict criteria for FI investment capital.
Joe's criteria were really all about maximum safety, predictability, and accessibility. Let's run through them quickly.
The capital must produce income. That's the whole point.
The capital itself must be absolutely safe. Protecting your principal was paramount for him. No risk of loss. Criterion 3. The capital must be totally liquid, meaning you have to be able to convert it to cash instantly if needed for an emergency, without penalty or delay.
The capital must not be diminished by unnecessary fees. Avoiding commissions, sales loads, high management fees was critical.
Makes sense.
Criterion 5. The income produced must also be absolutely safe. You had to be certain it would arrive. And criterion 6. The income produced must not fluctuate. You needed to know exactly what income you would receive next month to cover your predictable expenses. Complete predictability.
Wow, those are very strict criteria. And the investment vehicle Joe Dominguez originally identified that met all of these.
U.S. Treasury bonds, specifically long-term Treasury bonds.
Okay, why Treasury bonds?
Well, Treasury bonds are essentially loans you make to the U.S. government. They are widely considered one of the highest quality, safest interest-bearing investments anywhere in the world, primarily because the U.S. government's debt is its most senior obligation theoretically. It must pay interest and principal on its bonds before almost anything else.
So they protect your principal.
Yes, if held to maturity. They provide steady, predictable income payments, usually semi-annually. The interest is exempt from state and local taxes, which is a bonus. They're highly liquid, easily bought and sold on the secondary market. And they can be purchased directly from the Treasury or via brokers with minimal fees, with direct purchase being the cheapest option, avoiding middlemen.
But the source does note that the environment changes. Interest rates and inflation levels fluctuate dramatically over time, right? Which impacts how well bonds actually perform against inflation.
Exactly. It compares periods like the 60s, the high inflation of the 80s when bond yields were very high, and the time of the source's writing where inflation was actually running higher than current bond yields, making conventional bonds less attractive in the short term for beating inflation on their own.
So they introduce another option within the Treasury space.
Yes. Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities, or TIPS. With TIPS, the principal value of the bond is actually adjusted based on changes in the CPI. So if inflation goes up, the principal value increases, and your interest payments, which are a percentage of the principal, also go up. This offers a direct hedge against official inflation.
What's the downside?
The trade-off is that TIPS typically pay a lower fixed interest rate on top of the inflation adjustment compared to conventional treasury bonds of the same maturity. So the choice between conventional bonds and TIPS really depends on your personal expectations about future inflation. If you expect high inflation, TIP might be better. If you expect low inflation, conventional bonds might yield more.
Now, the source acknowledges that since the first edition came out, time has passed, the financial landscape has evolved, and many people who have actually achieved FI have used a broader range of investments beyond just treasury bonds.
Right. So with input from an Alfierian financial planner named Mark Seifman, the source, specifically Vicki Robin in the later editions, presents an expanded menu of investment options. Now, these may not meet all of Joe's original very strict criteria, particularly around absolute safety and predictability.
Okay.
But they are worth considering, particularly for those who are maybe younger, have a longer time horizon, or are simply willing to accept a bit more risk and volatility in exchange for potentially higher long-term returns to combat inflation more effectively.
This is where the concept of your personal risk tolerance becomes absolutely crucial, isn't it? How comfortable are you with seeing the value of your investments fluctuate, potentially even going down significantly in the short term?
Exactly. It's a very personal calculation. So what's on this expanded menu? Index funds are highlighted and generally recommended.
Why index funds?
Primarily for their very low fees, which aligns perfectly with that down-to-the-penny consciousness you develop through the FI process, where minimizing costs is paramount, and also for the broad diversification they offer. You can easily spread your money across different asset classes like U.S. stocks, international stocks, and bonds, all within a few low-cost funds. They are seen as a way to capture market returns and reduce the volatility compared to picking individual stocks without necessarily sacrificing performance over the long run.
They also mention lifestyle funds.
Yes, as an even simpler option for diversification, perhaps. These are essentially funds of funds. One single fund that invests in a mix of other underlying funds across various asset classes like U.S. stock, U.S. bond, international stock, etc. They automatically rebalance that mix over time based on either a target risk level, like conservative, moderate, aggressive, or a target retirement date.
So they take a lot of the guesswork out of asset allocation and management.
Pretty much. They can be a viable choice for those who want diversification and are comfortable with some market risk, but prefer a more hands-off, simplified approach.
Socially responsible investing, or SRI, is also mentioned.
Yes, as a way to align your investments more closely with your personal, ethical, and environmental values. The source notes that this may mean choosing portfolios that prioritize positive impact over maximizing pure financial returns. They reference Claire's story again, where initially her strong environmental investment choices created some tension with achieving her financial goals on her desired timeline. It requires careful consideration. Resources like socialinvest.org are suggested for those interested in exploring SRI options further.
And real estate gets discussed too.
As a trusted tangible asset for many people, it not only potentially provides shelter, reducing your expenses, but can also generate income through rent and potentially appreciate in value over the long term. Vicki Robin's personal story of buying a large house in Seattle, eventually buying out her co-owners, and creatively using her bond money to essentially lend to the community of housemates via house bonds, what she called the BYOB concept, be your own banker, illustrates a really creative approach. She used her capital, leveraged it for housing, and generated interest income simultaneously, eventually turning rooms into rentals.
Okay, so that covers the main investment nest egg. But then the source describes something called the cash fund. This is money you accumulate after reaching FI.
Yes, exactly. It's the money that accumulates beyond what your core investment portfolio generates to cover your regular monthly expenses. It's the surplus that keeps building up post-FI.
And this cash serves several vital functions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Psychologically, it provides immense peace of mind. It's tangible proof that you truly have enough and then some, which can really help to quiet any lingering fears or worries about potential future what-ifs or unexpected emergencies. It combats that scarcity mindset.
And practically.
Practically, it acts as a crucial buffer. It can handle any unexpected shortfalls if inflation-specific categories you can't easily reduce, like maybe healthcare or property taxes, outpaces your investment income growth or your conscious saving skills in a particular year. It's also the designated fund for replacing major items when they eventually wear out that new car, maybe a new roof, a major appliance, or even a significant dental expense like needing crowns.
And the source emphasizes that this cash isn't meant to be a fixed bundle that you slowly deplete over time.
No, ideally it's a living, dynamic resource. It can be replenished over time through incidental income, maybe an unexpected inheritance, a tax refund, freelance work you choose to do, or by simply consciously choosing to earn a bit extra through part-time work or a side project if and when needed or desired.
And crucially, if you've truly integrated the FI principles and broken that automatic link between having more income and increasing your lifestyle spending, this cash doesn't become a temptation to just inflate your lifestyle unnecessarily. It serves its purpose as a security buffer and capital replacement fund.
That's the idea.
Finally, the source observes a common pattern among many who reach FI. They sometimes return to paid work later in life.
Yes, but this isn't presented as a failure of their FI journey at all. It's important to stress that. Instead, it's often triggered by significant life changes, maybe getting married or having children later in life than originally planned, feeling a strong inner call to a new project or contribution that requires more capital, or adapting to the needs of aging parents. Or sometimes simply because they choose to engage with paid work again, but on their own terms this time.
The fundamental difference is that they return to work with their first FI achievement as a secure base. That foundation changes everything.
Absolutely. The second climb, if you can even call it that, is vastly easier and less stressful. They already know the process works. The amount of additional money they might need is often less than starting from scratch. And critically, they're usually doing it out of conscious choice or a deep sense of purpose, not out of grinding necessity or fear.
Rosemary the First's later decision to move east to be closer to her aging parents is a good example they give. While her initial FI income wasn't quite enough to cover all her expenses in her new, potentially more expensive location.
The relief and freedom provided by having some reliable interest income and that underlying asset stability, compared to relying solely on volatile income or rapidly depleting savings, was still incredibly significant. It gave her options and reduced stress immensely.
Alan Side and Trisha King's story mirrors this too, doesn't it? They reached FI, pursued their dream of starting a learning center, then had children later, which increased their expenses and need for income.
Right. So they adapted. They started a successful company together and also rented out buildings on their land for additional income. Their first achievement of FI made this second phase of earning much less stressful and entirely driven by their choices and values, not external pressure or desperation. It was FI enabling further life choices.
Wow, that was quite a deep dive through these 4 crucial chapters. We've truly covered a vast territory, haven't we? Moving from the practical, almost tactical level of mindful spending and maximizing income through the incredibly powerful realization of the crossover point and what financial independence truly unlocks, all the way to the essential considerations of long-term security and investing.
We've really seen how that core idea of deeply valuing your life energy provides the foundation for both sides of the equation, consciously reducing where your energy goes via spending and strategically increasing the return on the energy you exchange for money via income.
And it's that dynamic that creates the gap, the savings that becomes capital.
Right, the engine that can eventually support you entirely, freeing you from the necessity of trading your precious time for a paycheck.
And the stories embedded in these chapters are just so vital for bringing these concepts down to earth, aren't they? Marcia M's income literally going off her chart.
Incredible.
Steve W. discovering boundless time to write simply by valuing his craft more highly. Chris N. confronting that system misalignment even within a successful career. Ron funding relief efforts with tea.
Ted and Martha creating that win-win by donating commissions. Jacques and David giving away most of a book advance. They really show these concepts in action.
They powerfully demonstrate that financial independence isn't just about hitting some specific number or reaching a traditional retirement age. It's fundamentally about gaining agency, isn't it? Restructuring your life to align with your deepest values.
And finding fulfillment that extends far beyond just consumption or being defined solely by a conventional job structure. And the discussion on investing, while it touched on practicalities like bonds, TIPS, index funds, lifestyle funds, and real estate, ultimately brings us back to that essential human need for security and learning to manage the fear of not enough over the very long haul.
It's fascinating how this entire process, by making us conscious and intentional with our life energy and our money, often liberates time and mental space, which then leads people, often naturally, to reinvest that liberated energy into cherished relationships, into voluntary action, into projects driven purely by passion and purpose rather than obligation.
This entire framework, these chapters taken together, they raise a really important question, I think, for you, our listener, to maybe sit with. If you could vividly see a definite end point to the period where you have to work for money, if you could see that crossover point getting closer on your own wall chart, how might that change your attitude toward your current job, your energy levels day to day, and the choices you make today about how you spend both your time and your money?
What insights or stories stood out the most to you from this deep dive into chapters 6 through 9?
Thank you again for sharing the source material that allowed us to explore these really transformative ideas. We truly hope this discussion has provided you with some valuable insights, maybe some new perspectives for your own journey toward valuing your life energy and designing a life filled with genuine fulfillment.